to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Let the record show that all council members are present. The Open Meetings Act is posted on the meeting room up here on the wall, and we'll move right into the consent agenda. All items under the consent agenda are considered to be routine by the City Council, will be enacted by one motion. There'll be no separate discussion of these items unless a council member so requests. Item A, approve agenda as submitted. Item B, receive and place on file all notices pertaining to this meeting. Item C, receive and place on file all materials having any bearing on this meeting. Item D, approval of minutes of the regular meeting on February 18th, 2025, as on file in the City Clerk's office. Item E, approval of Treasury Report of Claims in the amount of $256,293.61. Item F, approval of Boswell Report of Claims in the amount of $86,048.87. Item G, award of the bid for the Beatrice Lincoln Street Improvement Project to M.E. Collins Contracting Company, Incorporated, in the amount of $554,222.30, as recommended by the Board of Public Works. Award of the bid for the Mill and Overlay Paving Project at 2025 to Cather & Sons Construction, Incorporated, in the amount of $642,223.39, as recommended by the Board of Public Works. Item I, award of bids for the Hannibal Park Mill and Overlay Paving Project 2025 to Constructors, Incorporated, in the amount of $71,893.91. Resolution number 7505, appointing Andrea Schaefer, Aaron Chadwick, Dana Heido, Verdella Wachowski, Darren Bear, Dave Eskra, and Shalina McGuire to the Beatrice Plus Advisory Board. And item K, resolution number 7506, executing the First Amendment to the farm lease dated January 16th, 2023, between the city and Tatum Harms in order to reflect the reduced number of acres and the amount of rent owed for partial D. Anybody want anything taken off? Seeing none, Mr. McLean.
I move the items listed under the consent agenda be approved, accepted, and ratified as presented.
Second.
And your vote, please. That passes 8-0. Am I on? Okay.
We can go home.
We're going to move right into discussion reports. With us today from JEO, they're going to present the Safe Streets and Roads for All, the SS4A Safety Action Plan. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
So to give a little bit of background on the Safety Action Plan, I believe we applied for this grant clear back in 2022. I think is when we initially applied for it. Yes. So at that point, when the first time they came out with this particular grant, you have to have you have to have a safety action plan done before you could go get implementation dollars. And so in 2022, we applied for a safety action plan. We went through the whole RFP process. JEO was selected. We've come down now. We ended up forming a committee to review kind of all the data that JEO is putting together. That committee met, I think, half a dozen times, roughly, going over information that they provided to us. We've had a couple of open houses. We had a couple of focus groups, and it is contemplated, everything has come together now in this safety action plan that Mark and Lonnie are here to talk to you about and see what the big revelations are that come out of this plan.
All right. Thanks, Tobias. Again, good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm Mark Lucha Harms. This is Lonnie Berkland, again, over from JEO. Tobias said we could have 45 minutes. We just thought at 2 pages per minute we could just read the report, if that's okay with everyone. That's the best I can do at humor, so that's what you're working with tonight. So
you have to allow for questions after.
We can do that too, yeah. But no, we're just going to do a brief overview of the project and the final plan that we generated. I believe you have copies of our presentation, but they're also on the 2 screens to your left and right. Tobias gave a good introduction, and we'll limit what I need to say to open the project or open our presentation. But I guess one more thing I would say is a little fun fact that you should be proud of is Beatrice is actually the first community in Nebraska to complete a safety action plan using Safe Roads and Streets for All funding, or SS4A funding. Omaha has done a Vision Zero project, which is very similar, but it was done with different funding sources. So congratulations to you for being that first community to do so. This is just a brief agenda of our presentation this evening. I'm going to cover the first 3 items that you're seeing on the screen, and then Lonnie is going to cover the remaining 4. Before I get too far into our presentation, Tobias did identify the fact that we had an advisory team or advisory committee that helped us through the process. They were kind of a sounding board, helped us identify projects, confirm projects. In addition to Tobias, James Burrows from the city was also on that committee, Brian Carver from the police department, Dr. Jackie Nielsen from Beatrice Public Schools, Councilman McLean, and then also Jessica Jaworski. So thank you to those 6 individuals that helped us throughout the project. Also, on our end, Kristen Anutka was also very instrumental in the project. She led our community engagement and actually was the lead author of this document. So thank you to Kristen for her help with the project. So just real quickly, what is this all about? What is the why of the project? And probably no surprise, way too many people are dying on America's streets and highways due to roadway crashes. In fact, more than 40,000 individuals in a year for each of the last 4 years have died in motor vehicle crashes. That's the little statistic in the upper left part of this graph, or slide. The graph on the right illustrates the rate in which fatalities are changing. And probably most concerning on that graph is not just the total number of fatalities, but the number of people that are most vulnerable to roadway crashes, and those that are pedestrians and those using bicycles. So a trend that none of us, specifically in Lonnie's and my profession, that we're proud of, and trying to do our part to reduce those numbers. The basis for these Vision Zero or Safety Action Plan projects uses this methodology called the SAFE system approach, which is a foundation for, again, these types of projects and to help communities reduce the number of fatal crashes and severe injury crashes. This approach acknowledges that humans make mistakes and that we're all vulnerable to these crashes. And it's based off of the 6 principles that are listed there on the slide, beginning with the fact that death and serious injuries are unacceptable. Secondly, that humans do make mistakes. Third, as I mentioned, humans are vulnerable. Fourth, that there's a multitude of responsibility that's shared in the reason for these crashes. Fifth, that safety can be proactive. And then sixth, that the redundancy to prevent crashes is crucial. And then there's also 5 objectives that are used as part of this methodology, including identifying the methodologies for safer roads, safer vehicles, safer speeds, safer people, and then post-crash care. And so that's the basis for a lot of these types of studies, and it's the approach that was used for your safety action plan as well. The process that we used to identify the locations and need for improvements was a very data-driven approach. It actually looked at 10 years of crash data and focused on injury crashes, but then also with a little bit more emphasis on severe injury and fatal crashes. And these next couple of slides just give you a little bit of graphics to kind of illustrate where those crashes are occurring. As you can see, first in Beatrice, for that 10-year period from 2011 through 2020, there were a total of just over 2,200 crashes, 503 of which either involved a fatality or an injury to one or more of the occupants. And then of those, 46 were either fatal or severe injury crashes, with 41 of them, again, involving what we refer to as VRUs, or vulnerable road users, mainly anyone that's a pedestrian or a bicyclist. So just a little quick nugget on each of the graphics then. So that kind of graphic in the middle of the slide, that would represent a dot where all of the crashes have occurred, but recognize there could be multiple crashes within a given dot, and so I'll reflect on that in the next one, which is the kind of the heat or the intensity map. So if there are multiple crashes at a given location, that raises the heat or intensity of that crash, and so where you see the yellow followed by the red, those are locations where there'd be multiple crashes occurring at those individual locations. Then on the next slide, the graphic in the middle would be those crashes that either resulted in a fatality or the serious injury type crash. And then the graphic on the lower right of this slide would be those crashes that involved the vulnerable road users or pedestrians or bicyclists and the locations where those are occurring. Also, as a part of this exercise, we also look to see how disproportionate crashes might be in locations that are referred to as disadvantaged. And these disadvantaged areas are defined by national census tracts in consideration of 5 components, and those are transportation insecurity, climate and disaster risk burden, environmental burden, health vulnerability, and social vulnerability. And actually 64% of those crashes that, again, either resulted in a fatality or a severe injury, 64% of those were actually in or immediately adjacent to those disadvantaged areas. So this all then got into an exercise where we looked to identify where an overrepresentation of crashes are occurring. In other words, based on the roadway characteristics, the fact that there might be more than the average of the number of crashes on a similar type roadway, and that results in what we refer to as a high injury network. And there's both a high injury network that's focused on intersections and a high injury network that's focused on segments of roadway between intersections. And that's what these two graphics pointed at, and it's really what got us to the work that Lonnie's going to summarize, where we start to identify the need for and solutions and strategies for crashes. The last slide that I'm going to speak to is just a quick summary of the community engagement process that Tobias did refer to. We did have a series of online and social media efforts that were focused on getting the word out, specifically as we were conducting those public meetings, but also just to make folks aware of what was going on. So we did have 2 open house meetings. We had 3 focus group meetings, one of which was targeted for the Spanish-speaking population here in Beatrice, in which we had a Spanish translator. And again, there was a project website, online survey opportunities, and as I mentioned, other forms of digital and social media outreach. And just maybe one nugget or takeaway from those outreach efforts, some of the key takeaways that we learned from those opportunities where we engage members of your community included focuses on the need for pedestrian and bike safety, traffic management and speed control, infrastructure and transportation planning, traffic and driver behavior enforcement, and then also education and community awareness. And so that's a little bit of an introduction, and the rest of our presentation, Lonnie's just going to get more into the strategies and prioritize projects that came out of the process.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah, so I guess getting into a little bit more of the detail on the plan, as we kind of did all that front end work, we started to get into what we call a needs assessment, and that's really kind of at the core of what some of the overall goals of an SS4A plan like this is. And so we worked with feedback from the public and stakeholders in our advisory group, and I won't go into a ton of detail because there's a lot of spreadsheets and calculations and kind of behind the scenes traffic engineering work that we do. But basically, we did a needs assessment of all of the locations where you saw those dots on the maps, those heat maps, to look at individual crashes. So severity and type, whether they involved vulnerable road users or not. We used some weighting criteria to basically factor and say, okay, where is the greatest need in the community? So both from an intersection location or corridor location, we vetted out kind of where were the highest needs in terms of those safety locations, and that's really what's depicted on this slide. Once we did that, we started to look at, again, those safety areas to develop projects and start to prioritize those locations. And as I mentioned, we did that both what's shown on this map for individual spot locations and then also for corridor locations as well, to give them a ranking of sort of taking all that data and stratifying it into what high, moderate, or lower risk locations. And we did that both for individual locations, and then what's shown on this graphic is the multiple corridors throughout the city as well that had those higher crashes. So if you remember the figure that Mark talked about, that heat map, again, it was no surprise to see where some of these things were starting to rise to the top in terms of greatest need, and as we were developing recommendations for those locations. In terms of priority recommendations, we looked at several dozen individual fixes. So things at intersections like improving a traffic signal or displays, pedestrian facilities, additional crosswalks. There might have been lane alignment issues, the need for more sidewalk infrastructure, ADA ramps, all of those things. But what we started to realize is that the clustering of a lot of the locations you have in the city of Beatrice really focus themselves around what we considered to kind of do some extra analysis of overall project groupings. And so groups of projects were basically assembled into 3 overall large recommendations, and we did that from kind of an overall corridor perspective. And so our prioritized project group number 1, we call it, is basically to implement a more holistic project along US Highway 77, really through most of the limits of the city, from Dorsey on the north down to Mulberry on the south. And what we were recommending there is to look at a 3-lane street section, reconstruction, sidewalks that are set back, improve a whole bunch of the intersections along there that had noted safety issues. And I think this project alone, even though it's a big major project, it would address basically 9 of the top 20 high crash locations that were on that priority list. So that overall project grouping of recommendations on Route 77 would be a really good thing in terms of sort of eradicating a large lump of your safety issues in the community. The second one that we looked at was Court Street. And as you're all very aware, there's things moving forward with that Downtown Cast initiative, your large-scale grant project, and with that relocation of the truck routes, the cleaning up of that cross-section, those intersections, the things that you have proposed with that, kind of in that area between 1st and 10th Street, that would clean up really an additional 5 or 6 of those top 20 locations and greatly improve safety on what we saw for the crash locations along those street segments as well. And then the final one that we noted in terms of an overall grouping of projects would be probably another pretty popular corridor in town, the Lincoln Street one that you've begun to do work on, and with some of that school traffic and things. But again, that one would address some of those remaining intersections. There was already prior study work done along Lincoln Street, if you recall. There's kind of a game plan there in terms of the sidewalks and an adjacent trail, intersection fixes, and some alignment issues. And so, we've basically generated the report such that we can give the data to Tobias and to James and your folks. So we've got all of the individual recommendations lined out, such that if you want to kind of pick things off as you go, and if there are rehabilitation projects or paving projects, all of that data, all of that analysis is there, and all of those individual recommended locations. But in addition to that, we've provided kind of an overall holistic summary of these corridors that if you wish to kind of bite off a more major project, that could be done as well. Couple final notes. It's always not just about infrastructure. We talked a lot with the groups about policies and programs and partnerships, and not a lot of rocket science here, but basically as a community continuing to do things like utilize your access management policy, look at things with redevelopment, maybe trails and sidewalk programs, public safety campaigns. There's a lot of good things that communities are doing just to keep that eye of safety kind of front and center for the public. You got a lot of great partnerships with folks here locally and things that can help from that regard too. And so we went ahead and noted that in the plan as well. Trails Network was another, I don't call it kind of sidebar task, but as we were in the community and analyzing things, we came up with quite a few recommendations just for your Trails Network, which is fantastic, by the way. There's a lot of awesome recreational trails, and we saw people using many of the locations while we were in town and doing data collection and field review. But there's a lot of opportunity to enhance crossing locations at some major, collectors and arterials, improve some of the signing, the proactive. Some of you have probably seen some of the rapid flashing beacon, the signing, some of those things at crossing locations. And so we designated and put together kind of lists of recommendations for a lot of those locations on your trails network as well, that you could kind of start to program and look at as you move forward. One of the last things, and this slide in your packet was probably moved to the back here, and so I apologize if one of those was out of order in your grouping, but in terms of just kind of general additional safety considerations, one of the last things that we like to look at is just sort of leave folks with a toolbox of other things just to be cognizant of as you're doing projects along the way, as James and staff are doing, again, pavement rehab projects, if there's locations that can benefit from these type of additional safety considerations. These all come from Federal Highway Administration and the US DOT as just good practice items. Some of these are things that we've recommended at spot locations, but just other good things that we've armed the city with to keep in mind as you're going along and doing projects. Kind of lastly, in terms of implementation, some of the things that are included at the end of the plan talk about your commitment to safety, and that's something that the US DOT wants to see with these plans, and really you've made that commitment. Kudos to you, as Mark mentioned, being one of the first communities to underscore the fact that you've created this plan. You are committed to safety, and that's a fantastic thing, and I applaud you for that. Continuing to report on progress, so over the years track where crash data is. As you're addressing locations and crashes go away, there will no doubt as you grow be new locations that kind of pop up on the radar. So just getting in a good rhythm, annually, and as NDOT comes out with new crash data summaries every so often, it's good to just keep track of, where crashes are occurring in the community and track potential fixes that can be done. And then take action, Looking at funding sources, there's a lot of grants that are out there related to safety, more than we've probably ever seen in my 25 to 30 year career. It's a big theme right now to help communities fix safety problems, and you took advantage of that with your downtown project again, which is awesome, and that's going to be a game changer for helping to improve safety. So with that's mostly what we've got tonight, and would entertain any questions if you got them. Otherwise, we'll get out of your hair. But appreciate you allowing us to work on the plan. Safety is something we're passionate about and love to do these kind of projects. So,
Questions?
Can you explain just a little bit deeper on how you scored something 100 and something else 50? I don't need each and everything, but give me a hint as to, besides just severity and type. I mean, how did you come up with those numbers?
Yeah, basically we use a formula process to, I think in part of it give something if as an example, if it involved vulnerable road users or not, it might receive a 0, a 1, or a 2. Same thing with, what was it, just total number of crashes, it would receive a certain score. I'm trying to think of others. I guess you mentioned the disadvantaged areas. If the location was adjacent to one of those census tracts or in that as well, it got a score, and then we would give that a certain percentage or ranking. And so as we flush that out, basically using that together is how we calculate that.
So is that the full report? Is that in there what your categories were?
Yes.
Yep.
It is in there. Okay.
Yep. Page
Thank you.
52 and 53. Page
Yep.
52 and 53. Thank you.
I just had one comment. I just want to thank you guys for all the work you did for the city on this. As being part of it, I know the hours you spent, I don't know what the total was, but a lot of analysis, and it was great to see. And I guess I challenge the council now to take this, and we got to use it. Don't make it one of the studies that just gets put on a deal, but we got to react, and hopefully we can make some good improvements for the city moving forward.
So I haven't read the entire report. I plan to, but I do have a question. So is this broke down in days, the accidents on time of day of the week, that type of thing, so we know how to adjust our enforcement and that type of thing? Or is it just point this year to this year?
No, there was an evaluation, and I I forget the level of detail we put in the report, but certainly when we do evaluation of crash data, we look at time of day,
It's in there.
also day of week.
It's in there.
So
I haven't read it.
There is some demographic information in there as well. Certainly, if there's more information that you want to know about that crash data, whether it's included in the report or not, we can certainly find that for you within the data that we evaluated.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's certainly a consideration.
Thank you.
When I read the report, excuse me, I don't think anybody is astounded that Court Street, 6th Street, and Lincoln, 6th to 19th are problem areas. I don't think that astounded anybody, but I was trying to find it in here, and I can't remember where I read it, but I'm not sure I'm right. So I'm just kind of curious about what you guys had there. Is it true that 4-way stop signs are safer than 2-way stop signs and are drastically safer than stop lights?
Well, I'll start, and then Lonnie will.
Because that was in your report here.
So first of all, inherently, traffic signals do cause crashes. Obviously, to start with, running red lights. That is probably the most common type of crash that happens at a traffic signal, and so that's why Lonnie and I are both pretty big believers in roundabouts when they have the right location.
Will be my next question. Yep.
Because it's almost impossible to be in a severe injury crash at a roundabout unless you try really hard. Now, 4-way stops are typically more safe than 2-way stops, but at the same time, they can be locations where there could be running of stop signs as well if they're not properly located. So it really comes down into thoughtful consideration when you're trying to identify the form of traffic control. By that I mean 2-way stop, all-way stop, signal, roundabout, what is proper, because there's obviously sometimes unintended consequences that happen at those
Sure.
locations that you may not think about inherently that would be a problem at those locations.
I think that's a pretty good summary. I'd probably just add, it's a really good summary. He'll beat me up on the ride home otherwise. I would just say that, it's been our experience, and I think national data sources point to it, that all-way stop intersections tend to probably be about the safest form of traffic control for pedestrians. If you can think of traffic signals, if the pedestrians are crossing, when they shouldn't be, which happens when cars have a green signal, sometimes that happens. All-way stops tend to be pretty pedestrian friendly by and large. Otherwise I would say on the whole, roundabouts are probably pretty tough to beat. Most whether it's, in Beatrice, Nebraska, in Kansas City, East Coast, West Coast, if it's across the pond in Europe, roundabouts have been shown to reduce 90% of fatality crashes, 75% of serious injury crashes, and about 50% of all crashes. So not to say that you're still not going to have a handful of fender benders and things there, and because we have them in Lincoln where we have a lot of roundabouts, but the crashes are ones that kids and folks walk away from. So
That's what I was hoping you to say.
yep.
I guess the other thing that was in the report that I thought was a little astounding is between 3 o'clock and 4 o'clock on Mondays, substantially more accidents happen than any other time during the week. And I don't know if that's, excuse me, my throat's not good, if that's school getting out or what actually is causing that, but it was way higher than any other time framing during the week.
Yeah, understanding the why of those is something we really didn't get into unless it jumped off the page at us. Certainly a 3 to 4 in the afternoon time period would suggest that there's school traffic related to that. Why Mondays versus maybe just because we all hate Mondays, right? I mean, there is a psychological part to that. Obviously, that's not our profession, so we didn't dig into that. But there certainly are reasons to that, and where it's appropriate and where we can put our finger on why those things are happening, we certainly do so. But in some cases, while Monday is higher than others, it's sometimes not exactly crystal clear as to why that might be.
It might be interesting to see in a couple of years how that changes, because we
Yeah,
had
Mike.
4
Right.
elementary schools.
Right.
Now we have 1, and the one that we have has a roundabout.
That's a good point.
So I would guess, in theory, we should see a significant drop in that Mondays from 3 to 4.
one last comment. I'm going to do just a little bit more than Mike did because he's on the committee, but Tobias, thank you. Mike, thank you. This is a lot of meetings you guys went to here. James, thank you, buddy, for all that. Jay, pass it on, okay. We appreciate Brian's work on that. And the two people, Jackie Nielsen and Jessica Jaworski, we want to thank them publicly for all the work they did on this too. This is a lot of meetings you guys put in on this, so thank you for the effort.
Yeah, I'd just echo that quick. I know Mark said it, but you know, we do a lot of this work here, there, and really all over the region. But this group, although not huge in numbers, was really dedicated, very present at all the meetings, and pretty invested and super helpful. So you have an awesome group here in Beatrice.
Other questions?
I have more just a comment on number 1 here. And we did this once, and it was painful. I remember this, where we narrowed that street down to 3 lanes, 6th Street, if for those of us, we did that. And it didn't last very long, and it was very hard. So I'm not saying that's not a good idea. I think it probably is, but I think we really need to think about how we do that so that it goes a lot smoother than it did before. And there was some pretty significant traffic backup, especially as you approach downtown and you had a light at every corner. So I don't want anybody to panic out there. We're not doing this tomorrow. Right. But because the people who are around probably do remember that time. And that was pretty difficult. So how do you make something like that go smoothly?
Well, I guess the first thing I would say is, there's some planning and coordination definitely needs to go into that so that you get it right. I mean, Lonnie and I have a very similar experience, not that we were involved with it, but you may recall where there was an effort by the city of Lincoln to convert P Street downtown to two-way, and before they barely even got started, they were already switching it back to one-way, which it's been ever since. And although I wasn't heavily involved in that, I think it just comes down to a lot of just, thoughtful and comprehensive planning activities to think through all of the things that may not go as you would want them to, which includes bringing the community along with you. There's no doubt there will be times when traffic is not flowing the way some people would want it to flow, but I think it really comes down to weighing moving traffic and moving traffic safely. I think it really comes down to that. And if you look at the nature of that corridor, where you see the location or condition of sidewalks, the fact that it's a 4-lane undivided, and unless there is a traffic signal, it's not safe for pedestrians to cross that type of a highway. And so, again, the holistic recommendation of that priority number 1 project that Lonnie summarized, if you get down to it and you want to address all the individual locations and the type of crashes, that's the type of project that rises to the top. Yes, completely agree with you. It will not be easy, but we're confident. We wouldn't have recommended it if we didn't think there's a way to get there.
I think we all know that along where the fast food restaurants are, I think we all probably hold our breath a little bit when we're driving through there, because it's just dangerous. People coming, trying to turn left, and there's all those lanes, and everybody's trying to get to a fast food restaurant or a restaurant in general. So I don't disagree with you. That transition, I think, could be, we've done it before. We did it on West Court. It used to be 4 lanes. We've all gotten used to it. But we did try it once before, and it didn't go very well, I guess.
Yeah, maybe just one thing I would say from the purest traffic engineer in me is keep in mind that, when there's conditions where there's a lot of left-turning traffic trying to turn out of those 2 inside lanes, it pretty much operates as a de facto 3-lane anyway, because that inside lane can't be used as a through lane when there's vehicles sitting in those inside through lanes wanting to make left turns. So,
yeah, I was just going to add, respect your comments, because we've seen folks kind of simply restripe, some do reconstruct, and there's pros and cons of a lot of that, but certainly at congested locations, we would look at things like even adding back exclusive right turn lanes, at busy intersections or signalized spots. There's some things you can do to fundamentally make that 3-lane operate better and more safe than what that 4-lane undivided sure is.
Any other discussion? I would, first of all, thank you. And I would also echo, I think we here are very fortunate taking on this project and having the experts and the engineers that you guys have put into this report will help us as we work with our Merchant McIntyre and apply for a number of grants. I think one of the things that at one of the meetings from both the state and the federal governments, when we talked about the RAISE grant, they specifically pointed out that this was the first study for Beatrice. So if you look at the 77 situation and you look at Lincoln Street and a few of those higher places, I think this puts us up a leg up as we continue to look for some funding and having some models like we have for Lincoln Street already. I think we saw how that paved the way for a $22 million grant. And so, thank you for being a partner with us, and thank you for your expertise, and thank you for being here tonight.
You bet.
Thank you, you're welcome.
Thank you.
And we're glad you're down tonight and not tomorrow night.
Yeah, we had to skip last time for snow. We told Tobias we tried to drag some more with us, I guess. Thank you.
Okay, we will move on to public hearings and bids. We have one public hearing tonight. Public hearing for the purpose of considering the rezoning of legal property legally described as the south 13.05 feet of Lot 4 and all of Lot 5, McCleary's subdivision of Lot 6, Block 9, R.B. Harrington's subdivision of part of the southwest quarter of Section 33, Township 4, North, Range 6, east of the 6 p.m., Gage County, Nebraska, commonly known as 106 South Sumner Street, Beatrice, Nebraska, 68310, partial number 01321100, from GC General Commercial District to R4 Multiple Family Residential District. Couldn't throw any more numbers in there, could you?
No, we couldn't. This is why we plat property, just in case you don't know why. So we are on the west side of Beatrice. You're at Sumner and Court Street. For those of you not familiar with those intersections, you're right by Twin Rivers. So this particular lot, as you see, we've got pulled up there, is the one that's circled. This lot was zoned commercial probably about 10, 12 years ago. If you recall, at that point, we went through, kind of rezoned all of the highway corridors as commercial, and we just kind of drew a line so many feet back, and that's how this lot got picked up. It's been a house, it's been a residence since the 1920s. It's had a house on it ever since then. Today, the way your rules read, since it's a house and nobody's lived in it, it's a non-conforming use. Once they abandon it for more than 1 year, it has to now meet the current zoning rules, which means it'd have to go back as commercial property. An individual came in and bought the property. They're asking that they want to make it a residence. It's a house. They'd like to start renting it out again. And so the proposal for you tonight is to extend R4, which is just, it touches it on the south side of the lot, extending that R4 zoning requirement north 1 block to incorporate this particular block. Looking at this, that lot by itself is probably not a lot of commercial value. Being half a block off the highway, it's a relatively small lot. It's got no highway frontage, it's got no highway access. In and of itself, it's probably not a great commercial property. And so zoning it back to an R4, which is adjacent, makes sense at this point, and it would be our recommendation. Planning and Zoning did review this earlier tonight. They did recommend rezoning this back to an R4 particular property, and so we bring it before you tonight.
I think most of our discussion's up here. I don't see very many people here for the public part. Anybody here have any questions?
Complaints, T, from anybody?
No
Taylor?
complaint. No complaints on this one. We did receive 2 or 3 calls on this particular property just to see what the action was going to be before P&Z and the city council, but no complaints on this one.
And not that we have to, but have they said what they're going to do with it?
Yes, they want to just renovate it and do a rental property.
All right, Mr. McLean, let's close the hearing.
I move the public hearing be closed at 7:41 p.m.
Second.
Your vote, please. Passes 8-0. Move on to resolutions. Resolution number 7507, adopting the Safe Streets and Roads for All, SS4A, Safety Action Plan.
I move the resolution number 7507 be passed and adopted.
Second.
So this would be the plan that Mark and Lonnie just talked to you about, went over with you. This will be formally adopting it as a policy for the city of Beatrice.
Any discussion, other discussion needed? Seeing none, your vote, please. That passes 8-0. Resolution number 7508, entering into an agreement for professional services retaining JEO to develop the city's tree inventory.
I move the resolution number 7508 be passed and adopted.
Second.
So the city of Beatrice received a grant, about a year ago or so for, I think, 2022 for the forestry, to do some different tree things in town. Some of those were planting trees, some were removing trees, but one of the things we had in there was to do a tree inventory and do an urban forestry management plan. We went out for bids on a tree inventory. We got back 3 responses, and JEO was not the low bid. They came in at $26,500, but JEO was willing, they offered to do the tree inventory and the urban forestry management plan that we were going to look to turn around and do in about a year. They were willing to do both of those for less than the amount that we had initially asked in the budget to do for just the tree inventory. And so that's why our recommendation is to move forward with JEO to do that tree inventory. They'll look at trees on city properties. I think the ones that are excluded are right along the river. Some of those we did not include in this, but they'll tell you tree type, size, condition, species, all those types of things will be in this. We'll also GPS locate all of them, so we'll be able to have it on our maps going forward to know what types of trees are in what locations. And so if you start seeing aging of trees and where do you need to start replacing them, that'll all be as part of this study.
So, quality, great, glad this is getting done. My question is the second part of it that they've agreed to do, will that speed that process up?
To do it all at once?
Yeah. Well, they're not going to be able to do it all at once. Obviously, one have to finish one before they do the other.
Right.
But that would have been our plan to hire somebody, to let that for bids. So the other piece is this going to speed that process up?
Yes, JEO should have this completed by June of 25. Otherwise, we're not looking to bid the second part out until 26.
Okay. Well, then I'm more than fine with it.
Just one quick question. So T, this only covers trees that are in our parks and along our streets, is that right? Or how much more?
It's trees that are in our parks and on city property. I honestly don't know if it covers all street trees, right? Those in the right of way along private property. I'm not sure I don't think it covers those. I think it's more parks and city properties where library, stuff like that, where you have trees.
Yeah, but the point I was trying to get at, it doesn't cover trees on private property.
No,
Yep.
no, we will not be entering people's property to look at their
That's what I
trees. No.
Yep.
Okay, seeing no more discussion, your vote, please. That passes 8-0. Okay, resolution number 7509, entered into an agency agreement with the Department of Transportation, Division of Aeronautics for project number 3-31-0009-024/025-2025 for the purpose of obtaining federal assistance for the airport.
I move the resolution number 7509 be passed and adopted.
Second.
It's going to be a test later, see if you remember all those project number. This is out the airport, obviously the Department of Aeronautics, but this is for the hangar project that's occurring out there. If you recall, we have about $3.3 million hangar project. In that, we're getting some CDS grant, which is Senator Fisher's appropriation money for about $2.85 million. And then there's a BIL grant for $294,000. And then there's a state grant for about $66,200 on this project. So your local share ends up being $99,300, or 3% of the total project is the local share on this project. So while going out and getting all those funds, Department of Aeronautics sent down a packet of different documents that we need to sign. And so that's what you're approving tonight, is for us to authorize all those different grant dollars that they've kind of lined out for this particular project.
Good number. 3%.
Any discussion needed? I guess the only thing I would add is certainly appreciate Senator Fisher. Having that $2 million earmark is a blessing, and we're very thankful, and I just publicly thank her for that commitment. Your vote, please. That passes 8-0. Resolution number 7510, entered into a lease between the city and Hoppy and Sons LLC for the purpose of storing and staging equipment and other personal property on real property currently owned by the city.
I move the resolution number 7510 be passed and adopted.
Second.
So we're working with Hoppy on Stoddard School. That project's moving forward. They had reached out. They're looking for a place to kind of stage some equipment while they're doing the rehab of the building. They asked about the basketball courts that are sitting there just south of the school. And so this particular lease would lease them the 2 lots that the basketball courts sit on, so they can use those as part of their rehabilitation project. So the lease you have before you, I believe, is 1 year for $1. We have the option to renew if they're not quite done yet with construction, but that is what we're doing in this particular lease.
I don't see any discussion. All right, your vote, please. That passes 8-0.
I got a real smart answer for that. I do.
Okay. Down to ordinances.
Nope, we have one more resolution.
Okay, you're right. Resolution number 7511, executing the First Amendment to the lease dated July 3rd, 2023, between the city and PK Management LLC, adding additional terms and conditions to the lease.
I move the resolution number 7511 be passed and adopted.
Second.
So those of you, hopefully you all know, but the city of Beatrice owns the trail all the way north out to Cortland. You get towards the north end of our trail system, right? That's where you have Tread Central. If anybody's familiar with that tire shop there, that's located just south of Cortland. We have a lease with them that we've entered into a year ago, 2 years ago, for them to use part of our ground for their activities. That includes not only where their shop is located, but it includes north by where Cortland is at. Tread Central is working with Engage on another economic development prospect. If that were to come in, they need to build some other buildings for themselves because they're growing. And so they've asked if they can put concrete on the property that they rent from us so they can drive forklifts on it and store the equipment. No buildings are being placed on our property. We've talked about it internally. We did not have an issue with them putting concrete on our property. The amendment to the lease agreement would allow them to do that. The dollar amount stays the same. The term stays the same. They have to remove the concrete upon when they're done using the property. Also, it says that they can't then cause runoff onto our trail or any other problems with our trail. You know, if the concrete becomes an issue, they can't get it too close to our trail, that kind of stuff. All those are laid out in this agreement. So that is what you're doing in this lease amendment.
Any discussion? Seeing none, your vote, please. That passes 8-0. Moving on to ordinance. We have an ordinance amending the zoning map for the city of Beatrice, Nebraska by changing the zoning of parcel number 0132110000, commonly known as 106 South Sumner Street, Beatrice, Nebraska 68310, from GC General Commercial District to R4 Multiple Family Residential District.
I move that said ordinance be given number 25-4, the title thereof be approved, the rules be suspended, and the said ordinance be read by number only 3 times tonight.
Second.
The motion to suspend the rules is not debatable, so your vote, please. And that passes 8-0. Ordinance number 25-4 by number only the first time, 25-4 the second, and 25-4 the third and final time.
I move that ordinance number 25-4 be passed and approved.
Second.
This would be the rezoning issue we just discussed, not too long.
Any further discussion? If not, your vote, please. Passes 8-0. Move on to public forum. The purpose of public forum is for the presentation of an item by the general public to the city council for consideration at a later date. No discussion or action will be taken by the city council at this time. Any discussion from back there? All right. All right, we will move on to our next regular city council meeting will be at March 17th, 2025 at 7 p.m. We will decide whether we want to do the strategic plan follow-up from our retreat, either in a work session or even as part of the meeting. At any point in time, whatever we're going to do, we are going to finish up the retreat items. And Also, I believe there'll be a resolution. I know there's talked about this in one of the meetings, but we didn't talk about it in both. One of the things that we are considering is moving the city council meetings from 7 PM to 6 PM. And I know one of the people we were concerned about was Alex, and he says that actually works out better for him. And so we will,
It's all about Alex.
So you will see a resolution coming up on the 17th to make that change. Just that way, transparent up front. With that, I think we're ready for adjournment.
I move the meeting be adjourned at 7:52 PM.
Second.
All in favor? And that passes 8-0.